Amusement parks. We never do get tired of them, do we? They're just so much fun. And expensive for the most part. I know some of them are creepy, others are just dangerously insane, but we also gotta admit the world would be a miserable place if amusement parks were not part of our lives. And we often talk about how dangerous some rides can be, but I'm sure that never stops anyone from checking them out. Now, there are some rides out there that were so dangerous that they were eventually banned and stopped operations. Today we're going to be looking at 10 of those banned roller coasters you just can't ride anymore. That's right, you're about to watch 10 different rides that look pretty exciting but are totally shut down for good, so don't get too excited there. Alright, I'm sorry to have burst that bubble for you, but I know you're going to be kinda relieved once you see why they are no longer in operation. The one at the top of the list is a roller coaster that I really wish I could have been on, but I guess I wouldn't be here if I ever did get a chance to do it. Either way, let's begin, shall we? Number 10. Thunder River Rapids. The first ride on this list comes from Australia, a place that's often mentioned every time we talk about dangerous stuff. Funny enough, despite that specification, Australia is very strict when it comes to theme parks. Their dangerous things are usually wildlife related, but theme parks? No, that's kinda rare. Seriously, Australia has some of the strictest people ever. Just look at their video game censorship. However, all it takes is one little thing to go wrong, and then it all becomes chaos. That's what happened to this ride called Thunder River Rapids. It had been operating since 1986, and honestly the ride didn't seem that threatening. If anything, it was one of the safest ones over there. It was just a simple water ride, one of those in which people are attached to a floating vehicle while they navigate a not-so-scary human-made rapids course. However, unfortunately, back over in 2016, an unfortunate group of 4 fell out of their vehicle and got trapped underwater while getting caught in the machinery of the ride. Needless to say, the 4 people didn't survive the accident, and the ride had to be shut down for good, even though it had had a long record of safety. Number 9. Son of Beast. Wooden roller coasters always give me the creeps. They're obviously some of the oldest rides in the world, and the ones that are still standing must be very strong to survive long years under different weather conditions. The Son of Beast was one of these rides. In fact, when it first opened, it was the tallest and fastest wooden roller coaster in the world, and the only one to have a loop. But fame had a price that included injuries on many of its riders, including 27 people who got severely hurt after a cracking accident in 2006. To make things worse, a woman had a blood vessel burst in her brain, and she blamed the Son of Beast as the cause for it. This was more than enough to close the ride for good in the year of 2009. Number 8. Verrückt. I've talked about this one quite a few times. The next ride on this list is not necessarily a roller coaster, but it's tall enough to get a spot on this list. In fact, it's said that the Verrückt was higher than Niagara Falls, which says a lot about its size. The scary thing about this ride is that it's pretty much part of recent history. Compared to other rides, this one happened very recently. It opened in 2014, and it didn't last long before it was closed down for good in the year 2016. What was the reason? Well, you probably know about it. Again, we've talked about it a few times, but if you don't, here's the story. The Verrückt was a high water slide that would send people down on rafts at speeds of 70 miles per hour. Usually the rafts had 3 people inside. But things got messy when a 10-year-old boy was ejected from his raft and hit an overhanging structure. This, of course, led him to his death. All it took was this one incident for authorities to shut down this ride for good, and even if they did continue operations, I don't think anyone would have wanted to ride after this incident. Number 7. The Big Dipper. What is the worst that can happen when riding a roller coaster? Actually, don't answer that, I don't want to linger on that question for too long, but here's something that usually comes to mind. Having your vehicle get derailed from the tracks of the ride. That is a nightmare in itself. And unfortunately, that is exactly what happened to some kids while riding the Big Dipper in London. A malfunction on the ride caused their train to roll back downhill until their vehicle got derailed. 5 children lost their lives, and suddenly, what had been considered as the most famous ride in London's Battersea Park was now the one that no one wanted to ride. Of course, this happened in 1972, so I'd hope this doesn't happen again, anywhere in the world. Then again, look at our list, I'm sure it's gonna happen again. Number 6. Ghost Train. And here's yet another entry by Australia, which is actually pretty shocking to be honest. But it seems that this country has had its own share of scary amusement park rides. The Ghost Train in Luna Park, Sydney has been operating for 50 years before a fire broke out in 1979. 7 unlucky riders were found after the fires were put out, and of course, the ride could no longer operate. I mean, Luna Park pretty much lost its entire ghost train due to this one accident. No one was ever able to figure out what caused the fires, but some people blame it on bad wiring. Or could it be that this place was haunted? It was a ghost train after all. Alright, bad jokes aside, further investigation implies that there were criminal intentions behind the fire. Apparently, a powerful man was trying hard to gain control over Luna Park's lease, and this was the way to show them that he could take control. According to his relatives, he didn't intend anyone to get hurt, but what can you expect from a fire? Fires are unpredictable. But these claims were later denied, and up until today, there's not a clear explanation as to what led to this terrible incident. Number 5. The Mine Scrambler. If you've been to an amusement park, then you've probably seen the Scrambler. It's a classic ride that you can find in pretty much any amusement park or local fair around the world. But what made the Mine Scrambler a bit different was the fact that it functioned inside a dark tent in New York at a park called Playland. However, in just 3 years, this ride was responsible for 2 unfortunate deaths. The first one was a 7-year-old girl who slipped out of her restraints. The other was a 21-year-old lady who got in the Mine Scrambler without being buckled in. Okay, first off, who does that? Second off, who doesn't check for that? This made her fly out of the ride in no time, and of course, after these 2 incidents, the ride closed down for good. Number 4. The Haunted Castle. Similar to the ghost train in Australia, the Haunted Castle in New Jersey also had a terrible end that included a fire. This attraction was part of Six Flags Great Adventure, and it stayed open for 6 years before tragedy struck in 1984. When the fire took over the Haunted Castle, there were 8 teenagers inside, and none of them were able to make it out. There were 7 other people who were able to escape, but they still suffered terrible injuries. The worst part of it all is that there had been a lot of fire hazards in all the trailers that made up this haunted ride. They didn't even have a smoke detector, so of course tragedy was likely to happen at any point. In the end, they blamed the incident on a faulty strobe light. However, officials came to the conclusion that the ride had violated local fire and building codes. You know, I'd say I'm surprised at this point, but look at Action Park. New Jersey, I'm just disappointed in you in general. Number 3. Fujin Raijin 2. And here's an entry by Japan, a very modern country that I honestly wouldn't expect to see on a list like this one. But hey, accidents do happen, even in the most modern of places. A long time ago, Japan had a very famous amusement park called Expoland. It first opened in 1972, and one of its most famous rides was Fujin Raijin 2, which operated from 1992 until 2007. So what happened in 2007? Well, this ride required people to stand up while going around. But things got out of hand when a wheel axle broke and caused the derailment of the ride. A 19-year-old woman died, and more than a dozen other riders got injured due to this incident. When authorities came to inspect, they realized that the axle, which is the part that broke, hadn't been changed in the 15 years that the ride had operated. On top of that, the park staff hadn't done any maintenance for over a year, and overall, this incident was just a tragedy waiting to happen. This crash forced the ride to close, and 2 years later, the whole park closed operations for good. Now it's time for the day's best pick. Now, the picture I chose for today shows what I consider to be the worst roller coaster tragedy that can happen to anyone. It's the photo of someone falling off the ride. This actually did happen once. It was a long time ago, and that's the reason why this ride isn't open anymore. Let's check out number 2. Derby Racer. The Derby Racer was demolished in 1936, but before that it was one of the most popular roller coasters in the first half of the 20th century. It was made out of wood, and it cost $140,000 to be made, which is about $4 million in our time, so that is not a cheap investment. That is quite a lot of money for a wooden ride, but even that huge investment didn't save this attraction from becoming a deadly one. Shortly after its opening day, a man fell off the roller coaster. This forced them to close it for 2 weeks before restarting operations. It then continued running for 6 years, but things kept getting out of hand until finally a lawsuit in 1935 forced the owners to give up and demolish the whole thing. Someone else did take over the lease and a new Derby Racer was built. However, that new one only lasted 11 years. Before we move on, do me a favor. My analytics show that only about 15% of you watching are actually subscribed. Come on guys, what's up with that? Can you guys please hit the subscribe button? You guys watch my videos every day anyway, so you might as well subscribe and keep up to date with every video we put out. Number 1. Sandblaster. Daytona Beach in Florida is one of the most iconic places in the Atlantic coast of the US. One of its most famous landmarks is its boardwalk, a place that was once home to the Sandblaster. The Sandblaster was a famous roller coaster, and even though it had a lot of safety issues, the thing was able to operate for 5 years. But everything did come to an end in 2018 when a train got derailed and 10 people got injured. In fact, 2 riders flew off the ride down to the ground, just like many incidents that we've seen in this video. But of course, this incident wasn't a surprise. After all, the Sandblaster had a lot of electrical and structural issues as well. It had to close numerous times due to failed inspections, but nothing could help it after one derailing incident that made it shut down for good. I guess we don't have to worry about these rides anymore since none of them exist anymore. But if they were open, which one would you want to try? Or did you get to see any of these while they were open? Let us know in the comments section down below. With all that said and done, that's our video for today, folks, and I will see you all next time. Later, everybody.